Greetings, my name is Korresha Maat, and I reside here in the Orlando, Florida area. I am a certified womb practitioner as well as a shamanic plant medicine woman. So my journey of people like to call it spiritual awakenings. I did that for a long time. And I have now, through my own growth and my own work, I have discovered that it's a return back home. It's a return back home to self, and it's a return back home to source, these awakenings that we're experiencing. And mine began in 2018, September, when my spouse at the time just said that it was time for us to have a separation of our marriage. And I went into a really deep depression for about 3 months. And I remember being in my living room, and I just was, one, sick of the pain, and two, feeling so disconnected from myself, because when that separation happened, I had no more identity. The marriage for me was my identity. My degrees were my identity, right? And so when we discussed the separation, all of that just in a blink of an eye changed for me. I didn't even know who I was anymore. And so I had to navigate that for 3 months. I didn't want to get up and go to work. It was some things that I really enjoyed about, doing that I didn't want to do anymore. And so one day I just remember just collapsing on the floor and just was screaming to anything that would listen to me at the time. Of course, for me, it was God. And at the time, I didn't have a relationship with God. I knew that there was something going on out there somewhere, and that it was always available to me when I got myself in a hot seat. And so I remember just screaming to that, whatever it was, like, who am I? Who am I? And please take this pain away from me. And after a lot of just emotional cleansing, just being on the floor, just screaming literally from the depths of my soul, I woke up, got up the next day, and I felt much more clear, cleaner. I had some clarity. But 2 weeks after that is when I experienced what a lot of people call a spontaneous awakening. And I was in my sister's bathroom in New Jersey. It was Thanksgiving Day of 2018, actually. And I went upstairs, I was cleaning my hands, and I was doing my thing. And all of a sudden, there was this feeling of love that had come through my body that I had never felt before. And I don't even think I was in my body for about 15 minutes, but I just remember crying and saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And from that moment, I began to see a lot of different numerical synchronicities, a lot of mystical different occurrences was happening that I never experienced before. All I wanted to do was be out in the woods. I would spend hours and hours out in the woods. That was never really my nature to do that. I was not going out in the woods for no reasons, but that felt like home to me. And what I later discovered after meeting my first mentor in 2019, she was explaining to me the reason why I wanted to go out in the woods is because the mother, the universal mother, has been calling her daughters to come back home and her sons to come back home. And so that was the reason why. So about a year after that, sometime between late 2019, early 2020, is when I began my womb healing journey. And what prompted that was because I was suffering from bacterial vaginosis for 2 years, and I could not solve this issue. It kept coming back. I would go to the doctor, I would get antibiotics, I would go to over-the-counter, I would get boric acid suppositories, all of the things. And it got to a point where I just was like, this is not working. And I remember sitting at my altar. By this time I had done created an altar. This was my sacred space. And I began to go out into the divine, to my ancestors, and say, I need the remedies to help me. What is going on? And a month after that, I met one of my other mentors, Queen Afua, and many people are familiar with her. She's an internationally known healer. She came into my experience, and I became a part of her 12-week Sacred Woman Rites of Passage program. And our first week, we went into womb healing. And that stayed with me so deep in my soul that I knew that was my work. That was a part of my sacred work, was womb healing. And I began to have conversations with my womb, and she began to take me into different journeys of my life, of different partners that have been inside of my sacred space. I had to go through many journeys of reliving and re-experiencing childhood molestation. And so I had to go in and do some alchemizing of the energies. And so in the process of that, you begin to really understand and connect to the mysteries of the womb. And so it wasn't just healing the physical problems, but to really go into the emotional things of that, because she holds on to so much. She holds on to every single thing, every emotional thing that we've ever experienced. And so in the process, I was doing a lot of cleansing, a lot of childhood cleansing, just transmuting things, journaling things out, sitting in my spiritual baths, and I would hear from the womb. And I began to write affirmations to her, spend time with her, listen to her, and listen to the ancient wisdom, because everything is womb. We literally live in a cosmic womb here on planet Earth that has been manipulated to be something different than what the actual womb is. This world in which we live in is a womb, but it's not the womb in which we actually come from. So that's how I began the journey, and then I began to just speak to other women about this wisdom that had awakened inside of me that I was remembering. And I've been taking women on journeys of healing emotional trauma, because a lot of the fibroids and endometriosis, heavy cramping, bleeding, PCOS, and that was something that I was diagnosed with at the age of 13. And I'll talk about that in a moment, just remind me. I began to understand that the medical issues were first emotional. The physical issues were first emotional. And so my work that I do with women is to take them to do the clearing of the emotional stuff that the womb is holding, and work with some other modalities as well, some herbs, some yoni steaming, to help them to bring the physical womb into balance. But until we actually confront the emotional stuff that the womb holds on to, the physical will remain. So in 2021, my mentor, teacher, sister, who I became a part of her ecology of shamanism school in 2021. She lives out in Dominican Republic, amazing medicine woman. She decided to come to Miami, Florida, and she was hosting what she called at that time a rapé and womb ceremony in Miami, Florida. And she's like, hey, to all of her students, I will be in the US, so if you want to come to Miami to come and be a part of ceremony, you can. My hands were raised up. And so what we did was, I came in town the next day. She and I did a private ceremony, and the medicines that she served me were rapé, KAMBO, and Sananga. Days before I knew I was coming, I was in a space that I felt like I was just really tired of going through and cleansing from ancestral traumas, wounds, patterns. And I remember sitting at my altar, and I just was like fed up. I was like, I'm sick of having to do this work. It was a lot, and it can be a lot, especially if you have strong intention on being that, what people call curse breaker. I really like to say just intergenerational trauma. That I have decided to say yes to that. And I was at a point where I was just like tired. I was just got to a point where I was like, hey, as a being, I came into this earth plane with my own stuff. So by the time it was time for me to go visit with her for my private ceremony, and we was done, I felt like a lot of it had been cleansed out. Like so much of it has been cleansed out, because there is a purging process when you're working with these medicines, and purging looks different for everybody. Some people purge through vomiting, some people purge through crying or screaming, sweating, different things like that. Some people purge through having to have bowel movements. All of it is welcome, because all of it is meeting the soul where it is at the time that they're coming to sit. So when I was done, I felt so much energy. I felt extremely euphoric, and then I felt like I was more embodied in just my own personal work. So a lot of old stagnant energy had been released, because I did do quite a bit of purging, mostly through vomiting. Shamanic plant medicine is all natural plants that I work with. They are jungle plants, jungle medicines. And these medicines are coming in to support beings in their evolution, helping them to cleanse out ancestral energies so that they can become more aligned. Many of the plant medicines that I work with are rapé, which is a medicine that is blown into the nose from the practitioner to the person who's receiving it. I also work with a medicine called Sananga. Sananga is an optical medication that really helps to clear out and decalcify the pineal. KAMBO is more of a frog medicine, and it is the venom of a frog that is found out in the Amazonian rainforest. And I also work with psilocybin, which is known as mushroom. So that is the technical term for mushroom, which is psilocybin. And I normally pair that up with a beautiful seed called Syrian root. And Syrian root is a DMT that helps enhance the psilocybin experience. And so I work with these particular medicines that come in and support people in many ways. It comes in to treat herpes, yeast infection, bacterial vaginosis, cancer, arthritis, chronic pain, various different illnesses. So right now I just use it in the raw. So there's a couple of ways that I use it. So one is in the raw, where the person just ingests the psilocybin by chewing just the raw stem and caps. And sometimes I will blend it up into a nice orange juice as well. I don't work with chocolates at this time, but those are the two ways that right now I work with it. I do have an amazing distributor where I can get chocolates from. As of right now, I've only served psilocybin in the raw and blended it up in orange juice as well. Womb healing is universal. Womb healing is universal. It is a global matter. It's a global, I don't want to say construct, but it is our most ancient aspect of being here on planet Earth. Womb is everything. Everyone comes through the womb. And one of the things that I've been really helping people to understand is that womb is related to both men and women. Right? So a lot of times when men hear someone talk about the womb, their ears most time begins to close unless we're talking about sex, unless we're talking about yoni, right? But men also have an aspect of the womb, which is the prostate. And so I like to bring men back into the conversation and help them to understand that womb, the aspect of the womb also pertains to them. It's just that the prostate is not active. The womb is active, but the same way that the womb holds on to all of our emotions, the prostate do as well. And that is why sometimes there are imbalances in the prostate, and men sometimes suffer from cancer, because they too hold emotions. And when they holding emotions, that's where it goes, is in the prostate. It is probable that people who are empathic like me and others, and if we don't have a sufficient way to create a boundary around the emotions that we take on, it absolutely can, because with empaths, we are taking in vicarious traumas. We're taking in people's emotions. And it's a training and a practice for empaths to keep that barrier, right? It's okay to feel, it's okay to empathize. The difference with a lot of empaths who are not grounded and understand that it's okay to set boundaries tend to take on the emotions, and it absolutely can affect different spaces within the body. Consider a holistic practitioner. My path is the path of the shaman. And so we don't look at just parts of the person. We look at all parts. And so if I'm with a client and they're telling me that they're having a really hard time in their intuition, they don't have visions, or they don't have a lot of boundaries set, I'm going to be like, okay, well, let's kind of talk about where things are in your pineal, where things are. If you're not feeling like you are creative, or you're able to receive pleasure or to give pleasure, or you're not connected to your sensuality, or if you are connected to your sensuality, if your sensuality is an overload, then let's kind of talk about that sacral space. So it comes up in my conversations. It's not something that I was about to say it's not something that I teach, but that's not true. I did an 8-week container last year that we went through temple purification, and temple purification was all about the chakra system. So I would say my biggest, and I've been doing quite a bit of traveling just by my spirit promptings, right? Like pack up and go over here, pack up and go over there. So one of them came up in May, actually, when I completed my 2-week medicine immersion with my teacher. So after the first year, our next step was to go into Dominican Republic for 2 weeks to work with the plant medicines, like actually being under the medicine. So after that was over, I actually stayed in Dominican Republic based off of a prompting from Spirit. And while I was there, I began to meet another type of community. And this community that all of a sudden came into my experience were white women from Germany. And this was very powerful for me because on my spiritual journey, I hadn't had the opportunity yet to switch from feeling like I only was coming to serve women of color and Black women. But the women that were coming to receive my medicine, it was almost as if I had been on that island for 20 or 30 years. They found me somehow, but that's how energy is, right? And I began to serve these women in womb ceremonies, and I would begin to serve them as well in some of the plant medicines. But sitting with them, what I discovered was they're no different from me. And so after I left that experience, I began to, in my marketing and even in my vernacular, when I'm speaking with people, I'd say that I am a global resource for people to expand their consciousness. And that experience in Dominican Republic is what changed it for me to that. So that community really helped me shift because there was a time where 2 of them, I had to go to them for their services, and they welcomed me and loved me so much. So that was my most biggest moments through traveling. This is really beautiful. Sometime when I was traveling from Florida to Oregon, so last October, prompting, pack up, you're heading to Oregon. I didn't know why. So during this particular time, for me, it was all about connecting from everything that was familiar on my external environment. And that this journey was really, truly about really knowing who source actually is, because when I left from Florida, I didn't know where I was going to live. I didn't know anybody out there but one person. So this was all about navigating, going from a hotel to an Airbnb, going to live with this person for about maybe a couple of months or so, then traveling up to a whole different city off of my promptings. Well, anyway, I wound up landing at this Airbnb on the coast of Oregon. And it was a couple, Caucasian couple, older, and they're maybe like early 70s. They were the owners of this Airbnb, and I was renting a room upstairs in their home. So just as anything, everything is always intertwined. Well, after maybe being at their Airbnb for maybe about 2 weeks, the wife began to share with me that her husband was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And I'm sitting there listening to her talk to me about the stories. He was diagnosed 10 years ago, but something happened in that recent time that things were getting worse. And after we was done conversating, I went upstairs and I went into my meditation just to hear from Spirit, like, okay, I just received this information. Is there anything I need to do, or was it just data, right? And so I began to get promptings on some things that I needed to do with him. And he and I began, maybe a couple of days later, I let him know the messages that I received. And as I was letting him know the messages that I was receiving, tears began to come out of his eyes. 75-year-old man. And what he began to share with me was the guilt and the shame that he had been carrying around inside of his body for over 30 years, that he was not available for his son. And he and his son did not have the best relationship. So my presence in this home was about coming to assist this couple and clearing out some energy. And so I did some energy work with him where I cleansed out his auric field. We did some talk therapy as well. I did some stuff with him where he was getting up in the mornings doing meditations, speaking to his prostate as well. He was all of a sudden able to go to the bathroom with no problem, because when I first got there, he had a bag where he was urinating in. And by the time I was really coaching him on how to be able to wake up and speak to his prostate, speak to his body every single day. You don't get up and not speak to your body, even if it's just hi toes, I love you, hi elbows, I love you. But teaching him, and he woke up one day, he was like, Korresha, come downstairs, I have something to tell you. And he was so excited that he was able to stand over the toilet and be able to urinate as he always had all of his life. But again, that prostate was just him holding on to the shame and the guilt that he wasn't the father that he wanted to be. And that, I am sure, that was the origination of his prostate cancer. The only physical health issue I've ever had was polycystic ovarian syndrome, and I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. Many people know it as PCOS at age of 13. And PCOS is an endocrine imbalance. So oftentimes women who have this issue have cysts on their ovaries, and sometimes they can burst. So a part of my womb healing journey, which I was talking about, is that I began to change the way that I ate. So I took out a lot of different types of foods, especially dairy, white foods, and certain meats, mostly all meats, let me just be honest. And I began to bring other foods into me to actually help facilitate the wellness of my womb. And with PCOS, a lot of women experience being underweight or overweight. Some experience excessive hair growth in places that women most times won't grow hair, sometimes on the chin, over top of the lip, in between their breasts, different things like that. Some of them have a hard time with fertility, very hard time with being able to conceive. Some women have very low libido. It's just a myriad of different symptoms that comes with PCOS. PCOS also brings on insulin resistance, meaning that you're not able to break down sugars the way that people who don't have PCOS can. And so that's where oftentimes the overweight comes from. So with what I did was, like I said, I changed my nutritional lifestyle because that's what was true for me at the time. To cut out certain foods and bring in other foods. I learned how to de-stress through meditation, through sound healing, spending time out in nature, taking spiritual baths as well, getting into yoga. So for me, it was a lifestyle change. And when I had the symptoms of polycystic ovarian syndrome, I would skip many months of periods, right, where I was not bleeding. Or when the menstrual did come, it was extremely painful. Since I began my womb healing journey and been very intentional about maintaining my nutritional lifestyle, spending time out in nature, making sure that I am alchemizing any stress as quickly as possible. I have a menstrual cycle that comes every 28 days. It is a whole celebration when I see my bleed. When I say it is a celebration, because that's a part of it too. The moment I see that red, I am screaming, singing, jumping up and down. I have no cramps whatsoever, and I'm able to also maintain my weight pretty well. So yeah, no more symptoms, no more pain. But basically what I do is that when a person is ready to work with me, I always schedule a consultation first, for several reasons. The first reason is because I want to make sure that this person is actively doing some sort of work and that they're not utilizing medicines to do the work for them, because the medicines are not coming to do the work for us. They're coming to teach us how to heal ourselves. They are coming to reveal things that we pretty much just romanticize about. Sometimes we be stuck in our different patterns and habits, and so the medicines will come to bring certain things to consciousness so that you can be in your highest vibration, your highest optimal functioning as a divine being on this planet. So I like to just do an assessment around that to make sure this is not a person that abuses the plant medicines, because I have a responsibility to uphold the integrity of them. The second reason is I want to see what are the health issues that you may have, because we want to make sure that we prepare you properly. Some people may be on some sort of high blood pressure medication or cardiovascular, or some sort of medicine for sleep apnea, different things like that. Whatever it is, and I just need to know what that is so that I can prep the person properly. And in the process of that as well, we discuss if the person is trying to wean themselves off and become less dependent on the medications, where they're actually trying to heal it, because KAMBO, especially the frog medicine, it comes and it restructures the cells, because in KAMBO, which is the frog venom, there are over 22 peptides that are in there, and in the peptides are amino acids that come and repair different cells that are maybe irregular. So that's the reason why I do the assessments and let them, just to make sure that they are ready to sit with these medicines as well. As long as they're not coming to abuse the medicines, because sometimes people be on this spiritual high. They just really want the feeling of it all. So a person, if I begin to feel into that frequency, then I would have them to do some sessions with me first, just some one-on-one sessions. And so we can move beyond that and get them doing the more deeper internal work. But anyone is a great candidate. The medicines are always safe, so it doesn't matter what a person may be moving through, cardiovascular wise, heart issue wise. We just have to prep them a certain way. This medicine, especially KAMBO, have been known to cure all kinds of cancers as well. And so it depending on what they're coming to me for, will determine how many treatments they will receive from me. So if it's someone that's just like, hey, I'm really needing a nice deep cleansing, a nice detox, because that's it too. I actually have done 3-day detoxes with people who just really wants a nice cleansing and may not have like any health issues. So some of them are just a 1-day type of treatment where I'm just like, I feel myself getting to the other side. I've been doing this work, but it's just still something that's sitting there. That's a perfect candidate for a one-time type of a thing. But if someone is moving through some really serious health issues, even like yeast infections or just like a buildup of candida in the body, probably 2 or 3-day type of a thing. What can people do if they cannot work with me right now, or they may not feel comfortable coming to me right now? First, I'm going to say this. I am a reflection of you. I have a certain type of wisdom that you may not have right now, and you will have a certain type of wisdom that I may need, that I may not have right now. And so I am just you. In the interim, I would always say, make sure that you tap into your own truth. Tap into your own heart. Go in and do the work. Start to ask yourself 2 questions. Who am I, and why am I here? And you would get the answers to that immediately, because oftentimes who we think we are is not that. And that question, the day that I laid on my living room floor screaming from the depths of my soul, I said, who am I? And I began the journey of who I am. So what I've done is I created 2 books, and I want to talk about the first one first. So the Rosebud Workbook Journal was actually published November 2021, and I want to share about how this book was actually birthed. I had just completed a 4-day online retreat with maybe about 7 women, and we was doing womb healing work. The day before we was going to end, I remember being in the shower and all of their stories began to fall into me. I began to hear their stories. I began to feel their cries. I began to feel their moments of confusion when we were sharing in the virtual space. And I remember just really feeling this overwhelming. You and I talked a moment ago about that empathetic type of personality, which I am an empath as well, and I've learned over time how to create the boundaries. So the next day I was in my bath and I said, okay, what can I do so that young girls that's growing up does not have to have some of the experiences that the women in this virtual space had when they was 10 years old or 15 years old or 6 years old. And I'm sitting in my bath and all of a sudden it started downloading into me to the point where I couldn't even keep up. And generally when I'm in my bath, I don't bring my phone, I don't bring a journal or anything, it's just me. This particular day, for some strange reason, I know the reason not why now, I grabbed my journal. So as it was coming into me, I was writing it. And what was being downloaded inside of me was the Rosebud Workbook Journal that I created for that age group from between 10 and 19. And what I did in here was an attempt to have them to be free and drop down some of the stigmas and shame around their menstrual cycle, around their bleed, teaching them through tracking and monitoring in the Rosebud how to keep up when their next menstrual is coming. And I know that there's a ton of apps out now. And I also love the idea of her being able to do this on her own. It's old school, but I still love it. And I also included a 13-month tracking journal for them, as well as age-appropriate journal prompts to help her to know what introspection is at a very early age. And that's what a lot of us didn't have access to when we was 10 years old and we were frustrated, or we having these dreams around the time of our bleed, or we having cravings or crampings and different things like that. But to give her an opportunity to be able to keep up with that. I also provide a chart for her to track what her actual bleed looks like. And so I teach her what a healthy bleed looks like, a certain shade of red. And when it begins to go pink, what's happening? When it begins to go dark brown or black, what's actually happening? So I have her to track down what her bleed looks like every single day of her menstrual cycle. So she'll know when she's going into an unhealthy bleed, okay? I also have a space for her to share her menarche story, because that's what a young girl's first bleed is. It's called menarche. So I shared mine in the journal, and then I give her a space to be able to share hers. And I love this because it's not a whole lot of information where it just overloads them, but it allows them to be interactive in the process of understanding their menstrual cycle. So that's what we have. I also include some herbs that can help them with their cramping is in here. I also provide recommendations on foods that they should avoid not having them in excess, because some foods feed tumors to the uterus. So I give them some different tips and tools. The next one is my newest one. I just published this one in July of 2022. And this one is called Womb Conversations, a guide to healing personal and intergenerational womb trauma. So this one is mostly for women. I share some very personal and intimate stories in here about my process of healing my own womb, kind of like we talked about earlier here. And I also teach women how to engage in their cycle week after week after week, so they can understand what's happening in week 1, what's happening in week 2, week 3, week 4, so that they can connect into that sacred cycle, which is the lunar cycle, which is the actual normal time, real time of how we operate as women, as the feminine. We were all under the process and cycle of the moon. So I'm teaching them how to return back to the lunar cycle instead of this 9 to 5 clock that we've all been operating under. I'm teaching them as well how to be able to track their bleed as well, how to be able to know when it's a healthy bleed and when it's moving into an unhealthy bleed and what that could potentially mean for them. And I'm also teaching them how to get comfortable with doing yoni mirror work. So many women have been disconnected from what does their yoni look like. And I was one of these women because of the different stigmas and the stories and the programming that we had around that your yoni is ugly or it's dirty or it's nasty and it's only for the pleasure of your partner and all of these different things. But giving her an opportunity and giving some guidance on how to have that connection through yoni mirror work. Yoni is the vagina, the pocketbook, whatever you grew up thinking, remembering. We all had names. Our grandmothers and mothers passed on all of these different names, but the yoni is the actual vagina and the womb is the uterus. Do intermittent classes, and the way that my classes come up is just intuitive. I'll get the message that says, hey, teach this class, hey, do that. I do have a circle that is called She is Power, where women are in that space where we are empowering each other. We are learning how to connect back into each other as sisterhood. It's almost like the ancient times of sitting around the fire and we sharing stories, but this space is primarily about empowerment and teaching women how to heal themselves in real time. And so we meet every Monday, and any woman is able to come in and join the space. Again, it's a global resource for all women. My classes are generally introduced and marketed on my Instagram page, which is Korresha Maat. That's where you can find out what I have going on. As far as how to work with me, that information is also in my link tree, or how to get connected to my sister circle, which is She is Power, and also to take advantage of my services are also in my link tree on Instagram. But if I have things that's coming up, like big events, whether it's a class or I'm traveling somewhere, if I'm traveling to your city, I will announce it if someone wants to work with me with plant medicines. For example, tomorrow I'm flying out to Dallas, Texas to go do a private ceremony with someone who has hired me to come and do ceremony for a couple of days. And so that's what I do. And you can just contact me if something is on my page that I have coming up and you want to come and join the space. I will always have the information of how to reach out to me to join the space. A mantra that I share with everybody. When you wake up in the morning, ask yourself every day, who am I? Where am I going? Why am I here? Always ground yourself back into that, because the world will attempt in every way that it can to show you the opposite. So always tap into the internal self.